In the Planescape campaign setting for D&D, which was made for AD&D 2nd edition, but fits well in other editions and is still used today, there are many interesting philosophies to be found. In the city of Sigil, there are 15 factions vying for power, all with their own ways of seeing the world. But the Outer Planes are a varied place, and as vast and complex as Sigil is, it's not the only place where unique viewpoints and groups formed around them can be found. Since the Outer Planes are a combination of afterlife and worlds all their own, there's an endless flow of new people creating new ideas, so the ideological groups present in them are functionally infinite. However, because DMs need something to work with, there are a few prominent ones, called sects, spread throughout the planes. And by few, I mean 16. It is possible that I've missed one or two sects, as they are a bit spread out through all the Planescape books, unlike Sigil's factions that are all listed together in one book. But I went through like 20 books, including all the main ones, and this is what I found. So what is a sect anyway? Well, that's pretty simple. Sects are similar to factions, groups of people who all have a belief or worldview in common. The biggest difference between a sect and a faction is that factions hold sway in Sigil, whereas sects don't. Sects are spread throughout the Outer Planes and typically have smaller, more local areas of influence. And not all of the sects are focused on some philosophy. Some of them, like the first one I'll mention, are focused more around shared activities. The Anarch Guild. The Anarchs are a sect found in Limbo. They're also called the Chaos Masters or Groundsmen. They're pretty much entirely made up of Githzerai. The Anarch Guild's activities are centered around something called chaos shaping, which is essentially the act of harnessing the wild energies of Limbo to create objects and landmasses, which really means anything from a rock to an entire city, or conceivably, if you are powerful enough, an entire planet. This ability has given them a bit of a god complex. The plane of Limbo is a chaotic mess of ever-changing landscapes, and the Chaos Masters are the only ones capable of maintaining a stable environment there. However, the art of chaos shaping only works in Limbo. Since they essentially just stick to Limbo, and because the inhabitants of Limbo are pretty dependent on them to create and maintain their realms, they don't really have much in the way of enemies or allies. Despite their name, the Anarchs are quite an orderly society, which makes sense considering their entire thing is giving order to chaos. So I would place them as lawful neutral. For the Anarchs, there aren't any good real-world counterparts to them, but I suppose they have some similarities to video game developers, as video game developers also create worlds, if only digital ones. Plus, another component of Anarch society is that you're highly pressured into staying in Limbo forever, like how video game developers are pressured into never leaving work. Children of the Vine. There isn't a lot of information about the Children of the Vine, probably because they're not intended to be player characters. They're an offshoot of the Society of Sensation, specific to Arborea. As far as I know, the official books don't give them any other names, but the foremost fan source on the sects of the Outer Planes also call them the Revelers or the Carpet Knights. They're the ultimate hedonists, giving in to every impulse, pursuing pleasure and self-indulgence without a second thought. They're always blissful, drunk, and dancing. The Children of the Vine distinguish themselves from the Sensates through their enhanced pursuit of pleasure, their thought that all whims or experiences have equal value, and their rejection of the concepts of art and love. I would classify the Children of the Vine as chaotic neutral, or even chaotic evil, as evil in D&D is primarily defined by selfishness, whereas good is defined by selflessness. But then again, I typically think of evil in the context of D&D as selfishness plus causing harm to others, and the Children of the Vine are 100% about self-absorption, but aren't so much about damaging others. However, they do believe that no impulse should be resisted, so it's entirely possible for members of the Children of the Vine to be sadists, whose self-gratifying impulses are to harm others. In real-world terms, they're hedonists or libertines. They're that friend you know who parties every night, doesn't get any sleep, almost never has a sober moment, and spends all their money on immediate gratification. Except, unlike that friend, who will probably stop at some point and come to value moderation, and perhaps feels a bit of guilt or self-loathing about their reckless and perhaps self-destructive behavior, the Children of the Vine tout unrelenting self-indulgence as the highest value, feel no guilt whatsoever, and will never stop. They're drug addicts, basically. The difference, I guess, is that their behavior probably isn't all that self-destructive, as the Outer Planes serve as an afterlife, So you could say that they're one of the few groups in the D&D afterlife who actually treat it as an afterlife. After all, isn't that what most people imagine their afterlife to be? Constant happiness and bliss? The Converts. The Converts, also known as chameleons or turncoats, are a sect found primarily in Limbo, but also in Outland. Their whole philosophy is that nothing can be known with certainty. The Converts believe that learning is a process of finding out how little you really know, and that the more you learn, the more questions you have. However, they don't reject all knowledge or belief, as that would leave them with no course of action at all. If you truly believe nothing, then what guides your actions? So what they generally do is go with a theory, keeping in mind that it's temporary, ready to throw it out the window the moment they find a better one, always knowing that they'll probably never find a perfect theory. Essentially, they are open-minded critical thinkers. They have no leader, instead being a free league of like minds. Because of their lack of strong convictions, the Converts aren't really hated or loved by the factions of Sigil. I would place the Converts as chaotic neutral, or in some cases perhaps chaotic good. The most obvious real-world comparison is to agnostics or epistemological nihilists, but also epistemological fallibilists. They're also very much akin to scientists, in the sense that they never take theories to be complete and are prepared for new evidence to change their beliefs. The Dispossessed. The Dispossessed are also called exiles or chippers. Their primary plane of influence is Pandemonium, but many of them can also be found in Carcerai. The Dispossessed is mostly formed of exiles from other realms who have been banished to the plane of Pandemonium. Because of this, they generally hold a grudge against the whole multiverse for casting them aside, and a lot of them feel the need to prove their worth to the world, usually by picking fights with outsiders or seeking revenge on the ones who banished them. The thing that characterizes the Dispossessed is a sense of entitlement, that the multiverse owes them something. The Fated faction of Sigil, as well as the Revolutionary League and the Sign of One, admire the attitude that the Dispossessed have, though the Harmonium hate them. As a group, the Exiles are definitely chaotic, and most are probably chaotic evil or maybe chaotic neutral. The Dispossessed remind me a bit of school shooters, who feel they've been spurned by the world and do drastic things to make their mark, though this comparison is probably much too sinister for the average exile. Guardians. The Guardians are also often called the Caretakers or the Protectors. Most members can be found in Elysium, though they are widespread throughout the Outer Planes and can even be found in Sigil and the Prime Material Plane. Because of this, they're one of the most well-known sects. The Guardians have a code of upholding the good, defending the defenseless, and only intervening when there is evil at work. The sect of the Guardians took its original inspiration from the Gardenals, a half-animal, half-human race native to Elysium, peaceful when in their home plane, and fierce fighters of evil when in other planes. Each member of the Guardians wears a token to signify which type of Cardinal they model themselves off of. Far-wandering Avorals, pacifist Certivals, combative Equinals, wise Leonals, cautious Lupinals, or scholarly Ursinals. Due to their understanding, compassionate nature, the Guardians get along well with most of the factions of Sigil, except for the Doomguard, the Bleak Cabal, and the Harmonium. Their alignment is neutral good. They don't necessarily care about how you promote goodness in the multiverse, so long as you do. The Guardians are something like altruists or pacifists sometimes. You could even think of them as activists or volunteers, or those people who travel to other countries to help when a natural disaster strikes. Or maybe something like Doctors Without Borders. Incantifiers. The Incantifiers are what remains of a long-destroyed faction of Sigil, called the Incantarium, also known as the Magicians or the Wanters. Their belief was that the secret to everything is or can be discovered by wizardly magic. Gather enough arcane knowledge and magic items and you'll be able to control everything. This actually kind of proved true, and they got so powerful within the city of Sigil that the Lady of Pain felt the need to get rid of them. Or that's what most likely happened to them anyway. Whatever actually happened, they disappeared from Sigil. And now, though reduced in number and in stature from what they once were, the Incantifiers continue the quest of mastering all magic. They're ambitious, power-seeking, self-centered wizards. Essentially, they're the Slytherin stereotype, minus the racism, probably. Most of them appear as old and frail, having used their superlative magical ability to become immortal, but in reality, they're anything but frail. The magical process to become an Incantifier renders eating, sleeping, and even breathing unnecessary, but they are dependent on absorbing magical energy. While Incantifiers do all share a common philosophy, they don't really organize or even interact with one another. They tend to hoard their knowledge for themselves rather than share it with other Incantifiers. In fact, when two Incantifiers meet, the most likely outcome is that they try to kill each other to gain more power. However, they do occasionally take on apprentices to turn into new Incantifiers from time to time. Unlike most sects, and due to the fact that they don't cooperate, they don't really have one plane that they're associated with. Instead, they're spread out all over the outer planes, though it should be noted that they're quite rare to come across. The Incantifiers are neutral evil. The closest real-world comparison I can think of is politicians, dictators, or business moguls, seeking power at the expense of everyone around them. Mathematicians. The Mathematicians are a splinter group of the Fraternity of Order, which is one of Sigil's 15 factions. They reside in the plane of Merkhants, because it is there where perfect order is exemplified, and they believe that if they can decipher the mysteries of Merkhants, they will be able to decipher the workings of the multiverse as a whole. They see a pattern in the gears, and seek to learn all they can from them. They're quite a secretive sect, hardly ever traveling outside of Merkhants, and never sharing their discoveries with outsiders. Aside from the Fraternity of Order, the Mathematicians are loosely allied with the Harmonium and the Mercy Killers, but anyone on the chaotic side of things doesn't like them very much. Unsurprisingly, they would most certainly be lawful neutral. Also unsurprisingly, their real-world counterpart is Mathematicians, but also logicians and physicists, especially theoretical physicists. However, they engage in their work with somewhat of a religious fervor, as they even have holy numbers, and unlike physicists, they for the most part tend to think that they can discover the secrets of the universe primarily through thinking, rather than experimentation. So they might even be compared to theologians conducting natural philosophy, or rationalists such as René Descartes. Merkhants. The Merkhants, also known as misers, goldhounds, or the hidden hand, are exactly what you'd expect based off those names. They value wealth above all else. Their whole thing is the pursuit of power through gold, getting whatever they want through bribery and extortion. They believe that nearly everything has a price, and anything that doesn't isn't worth having in the first place. A bit like the Incantifiers, they generally aren't all that friendly with each other. They maintain territory, their mercantile empire, and are cutthroat about any other merchants stepping in on their turf. Though, just like any good businessman, they know when to make deals with other merchants, and may cooperate with each other from time to time to screw over the local economy in their favor. Since the Outlands are essentially the meeting place of all the planes, where the most trade passes through, this is where the merchants' presence is greatest. They get along well with the believers of the Source and the Fated, but not with the Fraternity of Order or the Transcendent Order. Their alignment could be any combination of neutral, evil, chaotic, and lawful. Anything but good, basically. Though most are probably chaotic evil or lawful evil, depending on if they're more the type to screw you over with a cleverly written contract, or break laws and go back on their word for their own financial gain. In real-world terms, the Merkhants are free-market capitalists, drug lords, con-men, or scam artists, doing whatever it takes to get that sweet, sweet coin. The Opposition. The Opposition, or opposers, are actually not a sect from the outer planes. They reside in the inner planes, especially the elemental plane of air, as surviving on the other elemental planes is a bit more of a challenge. So they don't fit into this video super well, as it's about the sects of the outer planes. But there are only 2 inner plane sects, at least that I'm aware of, and I figured that's too few to make into its own video, so they're getting lumped in here. The opposers are found on the inner planes because that's where the clash of opposites is most obvious, and this is what they're all about. The opposition believes that the eternal conflict between earth and air, and between fire and water, is what makes the multiverse possible in the first place. They believe that things are defined by their opposites, that opposition brings meaning, and also that opposition makes both sides of the conflict stronger. They believe that strength is gained from adversity. So they oppose everyone and everything, not to be contrarians, but because they think they're doing a service, that they're making themselves and everybody else stronger by doing so. Really, being opposed by the opposition is a flattering sign, because it's their way of helping you out. And as you might guess, many opposers oppose each other. They're respected by the believers of the Source, the Fated, and the Bleak Cabal, but most factions of Sigil don't like them very much. As they have no real preference for anything other than pure opposition, the opposers are true neutral. They're chaotic when they're opposing lawfulness, and lawful when opposing chaos. However, you could also make a case that really, they're chaotic neutral, as a person who switches his espoused position on a dime is the epitome of chaos. But of course, they would claim to oppose chaos as well. Being so frenetic, it's hard to think of them in real-world terms, but they definitely have some similarities to anarchists. The Order of the Planes-Militant. The Planes-Militant are also called the Children of Heaven, the Brethren, and the Faithful, and they take up residence in Mount Celestia, as it's their primary charge to defend Mount Celestia and keep away all evil and chaos. But they can also be found in the bordering plains of Bytopia and Arcadia, preaching the good word. In the name of fighting against evil and chaos, they frequently raid other planes too, especially nearby ones like Mechanus and Acheron. The Brethren are a tight-knit group, always working together and providing help to one another without question. Members swear oaths of poverty, chastity, and obedience when they join the order. While they do sound, militant, they have a strict no forced conversions policy. They only use force to destroy chaos and evil wherever they find it. The Planes-Militant get along well with the Harmonium and the Fraternity of Order, and they actively work against the Fated, the Doomguard, and the Athar, finding their beliefs to be abhorrent. Their alignment is most certainly lawful, and mostly good, though you don't have to be good to join. You just need to obey orders. All in all, they are pretty similar to the Guardians. However, the Planes-Militant are more militaristic and more about law than the Guardians are. It's a bit tempting to liken them to the Spanish Inquisition, though while they do have that aspect of religious zealotry, they aren't evil. Perhaps they're more like the Knights Templar. In more modern terms, they're a bit like Christian missionaries. However, I think the Planes-Militant are probably more good than missionaries are. Primals. The Primals, like the opposers, are the other sect from the inner planes. They're pretty evenly spread out through the inner planes, and never leave them. The Primals are one of the most secretive groups there is, with outsiders knowing nothing about them aside from the mere fact that they exist. The Primals believe that they've figured out a deep secret of the multiverse, most likely to do with knowledge of the elemental forces that constitute the building blocks of the multiverse. Many believe that they've infiltrated the towns and cities of the inner planes to gather information and pull the strings of local governments. The Primals have a strict hierarchy. The first rank is Initiate, then Lore Warden, then Lore Master, with increasing secrets divulged as you go up the ranks, as well as increasing rarity. Since no one really knows anything about the Primals, none of the factions of Sigil can really be aligned with or against their interests. And due to their hierarchical nature and the self-control it takes to remain so secretive, I would say they're lawful neutral. To me, the Primals feel similar to the Illuminati or the Freemasons, but also to monks, the ones who cloister themselves off from society, don't let people in their monasteries, and spend all their time meditating on the nature of the universe. Prolongers. The Prolongers are also called the Cheaters, and they are described as not really being a sect, as they don't really cooperate with one another, but they're also described pretty much the same way as the other sects are, so I'll include them in here anyway. Prolongers are a secret brotherhood that care first and foremost about prolonging their lives, escaping death, permanently, if they get their way. They typically believe that there is nothing after death, and so the only thing of value is life itself, though a Prolonger only really cares about their own life, not anyone else's. See, Prolongers have the unusual ability to suck the life force out of other people to keep themselves alive. So essentially, they're like vampires. Being so hung up on the possibility of their own demise, Prolongers are marked by fear and dread, avoiding fights and physical danger whenever they can, preferring instead to lure their victims into traps where they can drain their life essence without fear of retaliation, much like a spider catching a fly in its web. They're hated by the Mercy Killers, the Believers of the Source, the Harmonium, and the Dustmen, but some members of the Athar, the Bleak Cabal, and the Fated respect them. Their alignment is always evil, and in most cases it's neutral evil. In real-world terms, they're extreme individualists, egotists or ethical egoists or rational egoists. And in the sense that they believe in nothing after death, they're materialists as well. Ragers. The Ragers, who call themselves the Brotherhood of Glory, are a sect most common in Isgard, Limbo, and Arborea. They believe that the point of the multiverse is to find out where they stand in the cosmic pecking order. They view life as one giant tournament, always seeking out a fight to test themselves and move up the imagined ranks. However, they don't just go around fighting everyone they see. They value honorable combat and only challenge those who look at least as tough as themselves. They like to tattoo themselves to commemorate each of their victories. And in addition to their tattoos, one thing that gives them away is that they like to wear all red. They have a good reputation with the Doomguard, the Chaositechs, and the Fated, but the Harmonium, the Fraternity of Order, and the Mercy Killers consider them to be lunatics. Despite the fact that they do have a fairly orderly ritual code of honor, their alignment is overall chaotic, and I would say most members are chaotic neutral, or maybe also chaotic evil. The Ragers have a bit of social Darwinism going on, and they're certainly individualists. A more straightforward comparison is to MMA fighters. They're that type of guy that imagines himself to be an alpha male. The Ring Givers. The Ring Givers, also known as the Bargainers or the Beggars, are quite widespread throughout the Outer Planes. Their presence is greatest in Isgard and Limbo, but they can also be found in large numbers in Pandemonium and the Abyss. Their philosophy is that the universe belongs to those who can give it up. True control of the self and control of the universe is found by freeing yourself of greed. They relinquish all material things, instead admiring poverty. They accept gifts, but always give them away. They never buy or sell anything, instead relying on the goodwill of others or their own resourcefulness to get by. Though some members of the Bargainers, like those that live in the Abyss, are evil and use the gifts they give to claim favors later. Those particular members are usually chaotic evil, but most members are chaotic good. The faction that aligns with them the most is the Transcendent Order, and the Ring Givers hate the Sensates. Their biggest enemy, though, is the Fated, as the Fated are all about taking. The Beggars have a lot in common with Bohemians, Ascetics, and Sadhus, but they're also a bit like communists, as they reject money. And of course, a clear comparison can be drawn to them and the homeless. The Verdant Guild. The Verdant Guild, also called the Wilders, strive to protect nature and all the creatures and plants that call the wild places home. They are primarily found in the Beastlands, though they do travel to the other good planes, as those places also require protection from the callous, ecologically destructive spread of civilization. The Wilders don't hate civilization or technology, though they do oppose its growth when it comes at the expense of nature. Each member of the Verdant Guild wears a mask of a particular animal of their choosing, which gives them the ability to speak with that kind of animal. The Sign of One, the Society of Sensation, and the Transcendent Order get along well with the Verdant Guild, while the Doomguard, the Dustman, the Fated, and the Vile Hunt stand in opposition to them. As far as alignment goes, the Verdant Guild is most certainly chaotic good. They're essentially the ultimate conservationists. You could also think of them as ecocentrists, which is a philosophy whose system of values revolves around nature rather than humans. The Vile Hunt. The Vile Hunt is something of an odd one. They don't really have a page dedicated to them in any of the D&D books, and don't really have that much information on them either. But the Planes of Conflict box set does refer to them as a sect, so I guess they get their own spot, even though in my first draft I put them in as a mention in the Verdant Guild section. The reason for that is that the Vile Hunt is really only talked about as enemies of the Verdant Guild. The petitioners of the Beastlands, those who have died in the prime material plane and ended up in the Beastlands as their afterlife, take the form of talking beasts. The Vile Hunt considers these creatures to be abominations and seeks to kill every single one of them. They can't stand the idea that a beast could be smarter than they are. In a bit of an ironic twist, in the Something Wild adventure, the Vile Hunt starts to get turned into beasts themselves. Their alignment is lawful evil. They are anthropocentrists and speciesists, and they also give me vibes of poachers. The sort of person who pays $10,000 to go to Africa and kill a lion, and then post a picture on Facebook to show off how awesome they think they are, when in reality, most people despise them for it. And that's all the sects, plus a few extra whose status as a sect is more debatable. Before, I said there are 16 sects, but of course that's only counting officially licensed ones that are well described. There are mentions of 2 more that I found in the books, the Expansionists and the Communals, but only mentions, no details. And on what's essentially the only website on the internet that has anything at all to say about the Planescape sects, I found 23 more that are fan-made, plus a good deal of further details added in about the official sects. So I'd recommend checking that out if this video interested you. Perhaps I'll make a video dedicated to the fan-made sects sometime in the future. And sects, by the way, is a hard word to say. But anyway, I hope you found the sects and their philosophies interesting. Some of them are pretty similar to a few of the factions of Sigil, but they still serve to populate the Outer Planes with more interesting ideas and groups vying for dominance in the battle of ideas. Please suggest in the comments any other parts of the Planescape campaign setting you'd like me to cover in future videos. And thank you for watching.